welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Back at it with another video for you guys. I wanted to do a little bit of a review of the return of the Saturn Uranus square. If you guys are new to my channel, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. Please do me a favor, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know where you're tuning in from, and make sure you're subscribed so you're getting alerts as to when I have new videos coming out. Well, guys, this is the highly anticipated, kind of like eclipse season, and also was just kind of taking a look at this kind of build up of energy that's going on right now. Some people are like, is it all the retrograde planets? Is it Mercury retrograde? Like, what is it? I think it's a combination of things, but really we are seeing the return of Saturn in Aquarius coming back into a square with Uranus and Taurus. I want to take you guys back through time and want to take a look at just a review of the squares that have been taking place all throughout 2021, because it is a story that has been unfolding for more than a year. So we're going to be seeing kind of the grand finale as these planets come back into a square. And I'd like to show you guys, just kind of like what we've been working with since then. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Obviously, I'm shooting this on the 21st, but before I get into the actual kind of conversation about the transit in itself, let's just break these down archetypally, okay? So we have got Saturn, which is in Aquarius. Saturn changes signs roughly every 3 years. It has been in Aquarius really on and off since 2020, where it was going in and out of the sign of Aquarius and Capricorn. Then finally in the fall of 2020, going into Aquarius and moving into 0 degrees alongside with Jupiter. So you guys probably heard about like the grand conjunction in the fall of 2020. That was Saturn and Jupiter coming into the sign of Aquarius together. Now, Saturn traditionally rules both Capricorn and Aquarius. We know that Capricorn is more practical. It's much more about business and our authority out in the world and responsibility, and it is in an earth sign, so it's very physical, it's tangible. But as Saturn moved into Aquarius, which it traditionally rules, right? Saturn has ruled Aquarius. Some people still argue Saturn does still rule Aquarius until we found Uranus, and then that became the modern ruler. Saturn has always dealt with separation, limitation, isolation, anything in regards to karma, commitment, hard tasks. I always call Saturn the taskmaster, or like the really strict teacher. And Saturn shifting into the sign of Aquarius has shifted from, I think, being in like that more kind of like active, go-getter type Capricorn energy to Aquarius. Like we saw this coincide with like lockdowns. I mean, like literally it was like, to a T when we saw it going in and out of Aquarius in 2020. And as a result of Saturn going into Aquarius these last few years, we've seen more social separation. We've seen much more focus and emphasis on our own goals, humanitarian type stuff, the environment, because Saturn in Aquarius deals very much with the atmosphere, whether that's quite literally on our planet or what's kind of going on in the atmosphere. Aquarius also rules politics, so there's been some like serious stuff going on in the political atmosphere. Friends, goals, networking, socializing. So we've seen like a limitation of all of that. So, you can look back to the early 90s, the last time we saw Saturn go through this transit. Saturn will go through each sign roughly every 28 to 29-ish years. So Saturn, functions very well in this sign, okay? Secondly, we have got Uranus in the sign of Taurus. It's been there for several years. It wasn't really until 2020 that we started kind of seeing this pressure that was building, and then we got into 2021 where we saw not 1, not 2, but 3 exact Saturn-Uranus squares. Now, when people say, like, what is exact, what does that mean? When we look at the degree, okay, so this is kind of splitting hairs, but it was exact in 2021. Saturn did come into 3 separate exact per degree and solar arc minute square, right? Or I guess minutes. And so when these squares happened, we saw the pressure and the tension of both Saturn themes and Uranus themes, okay? So traditionally, like, we like to see, you know, Uranus ideally, obviously in the sign of Aquarius, where it is more comfortable. This reminds me of the Saturn-Uranus squares that we had in the early 2000s. It was kind of opposite, though. We actually had Saturn that was in the sign of Taurus, and we had, you know, Uranus that was in the sign of Aquarius. Very interesting time. It was like the birth of, you know, like the internet, and things were just becoming like really big. I remember that time because I was like 10, 11 years old. And so it's kind of flipped now in this sense where, you know, then it was about focusing, I think, more on how we can come together and become connected. And it's had this weird reversal where it's like, you know, the internet was being born then, and everybody was connecting on instant messenger, and we were able to see the beginning process of being able to kind of get on the interwebs and connect with people all over the world. And also it ended up being a really significant thing because it did have a huge impact on, you know, shopping and buying and all of that stuff, consumerism, especially with Saturn being in the sign of Taurus then. Anyway, Uranus is our nervous system, and I'm wondering, like, what are the effects now of having had 20 plus years of all of us being so endorphin triggered by the stimulation that we get of you know, having a like on a post, that immediate gratification we get swiping right or left on someone, immediately being able to buy something off Amazon, the list goes on. So it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of reversed. Traditionally, you know, Uranus is not very comfortable in the sign of Taurus because Taurus is slow, it's sluggish, it takes its time, it's very practical, right? It likes stuff that's grounded and earthy and kind of natural. So like throwing Uranus into this sign is very funky and weird, and certainly over the last few years, we've seen the rise of digital money and resources with Uranus in a sign associated with assets. We have also seen the rise of like plant burgers and plant meat and lab-grown meat, and just like a total like transformation and I think change also in trends, fashion, beauty. I mean, it's fair to say that we are now kind of living in a world where there is more body, you know, I guess less body shaming, more inclusivity of people who have different body shapes, because Taurus deals with what can be the physical form of the body, right? Okay, so what am I getting at? You know, we see lots of changes and transformations with food, resources, how we spend our money, our value system, our planet, having Uranus in this sign. And we are now seeing the return of Saturn, because Saturn is moving much more quickly than Uranus, coming into this hard 90-degree angle with Uranus and Taurus. So last year, kind of unusual. I feel like I can say this is kind of unusual to see that we had 3 of these squares. So let me take you back in time and show you when we had them. So it was February 17th. And, you know, did something need to happen exact on that day? No, not necessarily. I work with like a 3-degree orb. So this was just when it was exact, but you might have been feeling this really kind of building for, you know, more or less several, we're a year early, several weeks prior to that, okay? So this was an interesting time. Like I personally remember what was going on in my life when all of these conjunctions were taking place. It was kind of hard to miss this, right? So we have Saturn at 7 degrees right here in the sign of Aquarius, forming that exact square right around this time on February 17th to Uranus in Taurus. And the moon was there as well. Stellium of planets that were sitting in Aquarius, right? The sun, Venus, Jupiter, Mercury was retrograde, Saturn was there. It was so hard to like not acknowledge what was totally under construction or what was beginning to kind of break apart, only to be put back together, only to be bigger and more significant in the Aquarius area of your life. So you might want to just like push pause for a second, go look at your chart, think back if you have to look at your calendar to what was going on in February of 2021. Okay, so this was the very first square. At 7 degrees, it's more so related to Libra and anything in regards to beauty and relationships and partnerships and anything that was just like really starting to expand in terms of how we were ushering in new relationships, Aquarius, and goals within friendships or just our own lives, and collaborating and working with other people. That was the turning point, right? For me, you know, I this whole episode for me is going to be like kind of like super like nostalgic, because it's been very, very personal for me. All of this has been happening smack dab on my North Node. I've had Saturn on my North Node really since 2021, just after my Saturn return, which materialized as like an extended Saturn return, which was a bit of a fucking nightmare, to be honest with you. But to be kind to Saturn, it ended up being really, really, really beneficial. Just, you know, it's hard to see the forest through the trees. Anyway, this was all going on top of my North Node, and I remember that month sitting around being like, I gotta do something right now. I gotta create the space. I gotta create the time to like do something. And I was really asking myself, because it was going on in the 5th house, you know, what do I love? Like, what are my goals? Like, what am I leaving when I leave this planet? What can I do to contribute to humanity? What can I do to unite people and bring people together? It was definitely a little bit sweeter because Jupiter was in the mix as well, and I had that Jupiter-Venus conjunction. Little did I know, within like, you know, 2 or 3 months, some very big things were going to happen in my life. You know, I got engaged to pretty much the person who I was always in love with for a very long period of time. I ended up having like the birth of, you know, the Midheaven podcast. And it ended up materializing as like me reaching out to a friend and being like, look, this is this crazy idea, but it might just work, and it might be unifying. It could be funny, and I think that it could like be a thing. So I focused on that, right? And it was the very beginning process. So then we saw the second square take place, and this was right around June 14th of 2021. All right, so this was the second one. And I just want to remind you guys that this was also while Saturn was retrograde. Okay, so, you know, at the time, both Uranus and Saturn were direct. So it was like a lot of like, okay, let's get this going. And so something was initiated and something was started, likely in some area of your life. And I'm going to talk about how the Saturn-Uranus square feels in a second. I just want to give you the dates. So now we've got Saturn at a 13 degrees. Obviously retrograde, so it's more in an Aries degree. It's dealing with like reevaluating, what do I like, what do I need to take action on, you know, where am I learning to kind of, you know, blaze new trails. It was a very interesting time in June because we had eclipses that were going on in Gemini. We had a retrograde going on in Gemini. This was all forming trines to Saturn. So if you guys remember last year, the Mercury retrogrades all made aspects to Saturn. So it was trying to get us to think of the future. And I remember reminding myself, being like, a lot of the things that I'm putting together, they're not really going to come full circle, and they're not really going to start to be tangible probably until later in 2022, going into like 2023, once Saturn had gone through its, you know, kind of spiel. But a little bit more active during this period because of the eclipses, a little bit more active also because this was the return of the Saturn-Uranus square. So you may have seen this as the time in June where you were reevaluating some of your goals and being like, okay, like what have I put into motion? What's working? What's not working? How do I learn to communicate more? And I definitely saw that as kind of like a reworking period. It was also for me like a big turning point where all of this was going on in my 9th house, and I was like, wow, being creative can be creating content, making art, having fun. It can also be about teaching. And so I kind of realized that part of the process for me of being able to be more kind of tapped into my own creativity and being an artist is sharing with people in a unique, in a very different way. And so that was kind of that blossoming. So lots of sharing ideas. I think it was like, what are we learning? How are we communicating with people? That kind of stuff. Very active time. And then how can we forget the third Saturn-Uranus square, which took place on Christmas Eve 2021. I was wholeheartedly expecting just a whole lot of drama around Christmas time, you know? I was like, man, there's going to be like family members that are just going to be strangling each other. And also knowing that there was some other really, really gnarly astrology that was going on at the time. So Now, a little bit different, we've got the Saturn Uranus square at 11 degrees. And very Aquarian degree. Saturn's direct, Uranus is retrograde. So Saturn is like really committed to whatever has been worked on, or whatever was kind of cemented or kind of laid out. Uranus was still adapting. So we are still adapting physically, right, to some of the changes when it comes to some of our goals and, you know, where things were going. And like I said, these squares were felt likely several weeks leading up to the square. Like we don't have to see something on that exact day. Lots of extreme astrology going on. We also had a Venus retrograde in Capricorn coming into conjunction with Pluto. So very, very, very tense just in the skies in general, you know. Since the end of 2021, yes, we have still seen, you know, Saturn and Uranus retrogrades, but they have not been in a square. And so I want to reiterate, they will not square exactly, but I'm not going to split hairs. I feel like if we work with like a 2 or 3 degree orb, having both of these planets in a square now by the same degree, it's like you're going to feel it, right? And we're starting to feel that building right now. And you know, like I said, I'm not trying to make this like too personal, but it's been a really wild ride for me, because my Sun and my Mercury are at basically 19 degrees of Scorpio. So I've had Saturn squaring, you know, my Sun in the 5th house on my North Node. I've had Uranus opposing my Sun and my Mercury in my 8th house, right? And it's all hitting my nodes, and it's just been like so personal. These transits have been so personal for me that the way that I can best sum this up has been Saturn is basically saying to you, where are you so focused on your goals? Where are you so committed to the future? Where do you want freedom? Where are you willing to do the heavy work and the heavy lifting? Even if it's not visible, right? Because it isn't an air element. It is very much about calling friends, communicating, meeting with others, sharing ideas, being able to be different. And that's probably been like the biggest takeaway for me, is that there doesn't have to be this struggle between, you know, authenticity and acceptance. Part of it maybe is just getting older, right? And as you get older, you just really don't care as much what other people think. But it's been a big thing for me, working out of that and realizing that self-gratification and the wholehearted, you know, commitment to authenticity has to outweigh anything else across the board. And that if I'm really committed to my goals, then things will manifest, right? The universe will provide. I will see physical changes and transformations to really support my dreams coming into fruition. Not easy to do with Saturn square your Sun and your Mercury. It's been kind of wild. And Uranus being in Taurus is this change and transformation and fluctuation of our values and our food and our resources. And yes, we have seen, as a result of the Saturn Uranus squares, that there have been supply shortages or delays or anything like that. And, you know, I'm not going to go on a conspiracy theorist kind of binge here, but I will say this. Saturn in a square to Uranus makes me feel like there are certain pressures in the world right now. Some say vibration, some say government, some say, you know, world powers, whatever, Saturn and Aquarius, that are literally pressuring and challenging and really scaring us into having like scarcity values, right? Like, what if I go against the grain? Am I gonna get, you know, like censored and taken off of YouTube? Like, what if like I don't hang out with my friends who I really don't resonate with, but like, you know, what if I feel rejected by them? Then what? Then what do I have? Right? So there's been this sense of just an ongoing theme of feeling the need or the want to break away, and knowing that that may be the direction that we need to go in, but really having to kind of work through a lot of fears of scarcity and security, and will there be enough money and food and resources with that North Node in Taurus. And also that's all coming into dings throughout this year where Saturn is squaring the South Node in Scorpio, showing us where in the past we haven't had enough, or there's been death, or there's been pain, or there's been ending, or that we're afraid to like uncover secrets, right? And we just kind of like want to continue moving forward and keeping our head down. Saturn has this archetypal energy of the teacher, the taskmaster, the authority figure. And I've seen it, I think, in the sign of Aquarius more so in terms of politics, global politics. We see this rise in all of these, really wealthy, technocratic type, people, individuals, and even, giving way into politics and people of power and trying to like control things, right? Controlling the environment, controlling the masses. Saturn in Aquarius is about the masses, trying to keep people from coming together and uniting or protesting or challenging the status quo. So in many ways, even though it's been a total fucking pain in the ass on a personal level, the Saturn square Uranus, I think, has been really it's been worth the challenge. Fixed squares in general give us a little bit of grit. Okay, that's what it gives us. So whether you're having that in your natal chart, or you're having that through a square, this experience of like the pressure and then the release and then the pressure and then the release is similar to that of like labor pains and like getting ready to like give birth. The contractions, the expansion, the contractions, the expansion, and then eventually there is life, right? Very much North Node, Uranus, and Taurus. Now, Uranus is this punk kid with a mohawk that wants to just burn piles of money with Uranus and Taurus. I mean, we've seen this as insane inflation, which was expected, not just from astrologers, but I think we were seeing this across the boards from, analysts and other people. I'm not talking about the people who told us last year there would be inflation. I'm talking about people who are really crunching the numbers, saying we can't keep printing money. It's inevitably just going to be like this thing where the system is just going to pop. So I believe that the return of the Saturn-Uranus square is going to be more inflation. I think having eclipses in the financial signs of Scorpio and also Taurus over the next 2 months is also going to be particularly rocky in the markets. Just knowing that we're going to have a solar eclipse in Scorpio that's going to be strongly featuring Venus in her detriment. We're also going to be having a lunar eclipse in Taurus conjunct Uranus, which is going to just totally rattle things financially. And it will also square Saturn. That, boy, oh boy, the Saturn-Uranus square, if it's not felt here in September going into October, best believe it's going to be alive and well the first 2 weeks of November. So you are going to feel that rock and rattle and roll come back. So for many of us, like I said, this has been an ongoing story. This has been going on since February of 2021, where we bend and where we contract and where we are willing to hold on and where we say, actually, no more. Now, Saturn is responsible for reining things in and not allowing Uranus to kind of like run loose. So perhaps maybe whether this is governments or the Fed or whatever, the internet, controls that have been monitoring things and censoring things that are keeping people from just totally going ham and freaking out about financial situations in the world or food shortages. I love that Uranus has manifested also as a group of individuals who have essentially stood up and said, fuck this, we're not doing this. We won't comply, right? And we saw that materialize first with, the truckers in Canada. We also have seen this recently manifesting, and we haven't even had the squares yet this year, but we've seen it manifesting as the farmers who have been getting involved. Uranus is unions. So unions, I think of teachers' unions. I think of nurses' unions. I think of blue-collar workers just in general who have been working in food development or production, I guess I should say, who have also been kind of challenging what's been going on with a lot of food shortages, but what's really going on with the shortages, and is it happening because of delays, or is it really happening because they're burning down a bunch of food processing plants? I mean, you don't believe me, go look into it. It's absolutely insane how many are being burnt down or having fires here in the United States. Then we see that the farmers have been standing up, and there's been protests that have been going on against, raising taxes, not allowing them to farm in specific ways. We've seen shortages of fertilizer and all kinds of other mess. Taurus is farmers as well. Taurus also deals with banking. And so we've seen this wild banking situation with, certain banks all over the world, predominantly in Asia, that have had issues and basically shutting banks down and telling people that they can't have withdrawals. We saw this during the protests that were also going on in Canada. And then just recently this year, we saw a several-day shortage with internet, and people were having a difficult time using debit transactions and also, taking money out. Uranus is electricity. It's energy, right? It's also the earth. And so I'm anticipating a lot more rocks and rattles and rolls that might be going on. We've had a number in this last week of really significant earthquakes. I believe there was one that was taking place in Mexico, and then there was another one that happened in Asia. I can't remember where, but there's too many things to kind of wrangle. I myself really try not to watch the news personally. I feel like if there's something really significant going on, I'm going to hear about it. And if I am going to go listen to news, I'm going to be supporting and giving money to independent journalists, because I do believe that the mainstream media is definitely alive and well with its deception, especially right now with some of these oppositions and squares to Neptune. Understand that narratives right now are changing, and likely, as we've seen in the past, whenever there was a Saturn square Uranus, there was also this materialization of some kind of crisis or something that was going on. Is it smoke and mirrors? I don't know. In the midst of this, we see that Uranus is also making slight sextiles still to Neptune. So there is still some stuff that's foggy, hazy, things that are going on behind the scenes. Guys, we've got Pluto in the last degrees of Capricorn. Next year it'll go into Aquarius. Saturn, which will be in the last degrees of Aquarius, which will be going into Pisces. Pisces, where we have Neptune. We've got 3 major outer planets, soon to be 4 when Jupiter retrogrades, all in the last quarter, right, of the zodiac. Some speculate, are we living in end times? Well, I don't know. I'm not really a doomsday enthusiast. Above all, I try to stay optimistic about the future. But I will tell you that as we're seeing these planets near the end of their signs and also coming into the later signs of the zodiac, it's very clear that we are wrapping up cycles, right? We're wrapping things up. In the years ahead, we're going to see Neptune and also Saturn go into Aries, and I think that in 2026, 2027, 2028 can be new cycles that are starting, but I also know that we have to wait probably another God knows how many amount of years. I'm not going to crunch those numbers, but at least 20, if not more, until, Pluto is going to be getting closer to going into the sign of Aries. So, most of us who are watching this, we're going to be much older when that's taking place. What happens when we see Saturn Uranus squares? Well, the pressure, right, of a 90-degree angle, it's the same energy of Mars, is trying to get each one to act, basically. And because Saturn is the one that's forming the square to Uranus, it's basically, saying that it's got the upper hand. It's got a strangle or a lasso on the bull, not allowing things to completely, wild out. I think in the months ahead, that's going to be more challenging to do, especially knowing that next year we're going to have Jupiter go into Taurus as well. We're going to see that Pluto is going to go into Aquarius, and we're going to realize that there are we're in for a pretty big significant shift in terms of money and resources. Pluto going into Aquarius, we're going to realize that currently the state of AI and anything that's digital or anything in regards to technology is basically in its most infant state. We are going to see some of the most insane, outrageous changes in terms of tech that we have never seen. I can only liken it to when things really started to kind of pick up when we had the internet, but even then it wasn't Pluto in Aquarius. So we're going to see that there is a great amount of wealth that's going to be coming from Pluto in an air sign. So what will be considered wealthy then? Will it be knowledge? Will it be information? Will it be a new type of power? Will it be groups? Will there be super groups that come in? I don't know. But I will tell you that this final square is going to represent, in some area of your life, the finale of where do I buckle down and kind of hold, and where do I break free or release and kind of like let go or upend something and totally physically change and transform. The fact that this is also in the same degree where we had Mars and Uranus collide actually earlier this summer, pretty damn important. So if you go back in time and you think about what was happening at the very end of July, Mars came into conjunction with Uranus right around here. It was the 31st and the North Node. Very important because Uranus is now retrograding back over that degree. Now in the fall, we're going to see that there will be eclipses that are going to be taking place that are going to be in opposition to this degree. I'm really honing in on the eclipse that's going to be taking place on November 8th, 2022. When we have this full moon in Taurus, lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipses are emotional, right? They're endings, clearings, things kind of wrapping up. I love the moon in Taurus. I love the moon conjunct the North Node. Not a fan of the exact conjunction to Uranus, not a fan of the opposition that it will have to Mercury, the Sun, and Venus. Not to mention the square to Saturn, also back at 18 degrees. Whatever you've been wrestling with, really since the beginning of February, likely you're going to find out which direction things are going to fall in. Are you going to fall into the direction of totally changing and transforming or freeing yourself from materialism or a physical situation? Or are you going to fall in line? Are you going to comply? Are you going to willingly go along with an agenda or some kind of limitation in your life? That is the question. Not easily answered. A lot of the things, even that astrologers predict, right? We're not always saying like an event will happen on this day. Some of us can do that, but it's kind of like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Like, just because you can do that doesn't mean you should. And I don't really feel like that's always the smartest thing to do because it's taking away from free will. And the truth is that that's what's so beautiful about this transit, is that it is allowing us to really have the opportunity to exercise our free will through this square, because it is forcing us to act and make some real big decisions. I think about our values, I'm anticipating Pluto going into Aquarius is definitely going to be a rollout of a new possible digital dollar, especially, globally. I think we're going to see more emphasis on that, especially like coins per specific nations. I also feel like it's going to materialize as some kind of new global elite group. Some speculate it'll be a one world government. I don't know. We don't know. But I do know that it pays to be prepared. And that's what I love about astrology, is that we can look at this and see kind of what's materializing in the sky, getting an idea of what's kind of coming up. And I'm always a big champion for being prepared, right? Being forewarned. If you know what's going to be coming energetically, then you can kind of better strategize and plan. So when the inevitable does hit, days earlier, weeks later, you're prepared. Especially because eclipses play out over time. We've had eclipses that have been going on in Taurus since really mid-November, and we've had another set of eclipses that took place at the end of April 2022 and the beginning of May 2022, so they're coming back. So you guys may want to look at those eclipse periods and see what was panning out. The eclipses that took place in November of 2021, they were North Node Taurus eclipses. The North Node hadn't physically moved into the North Node. The North Node had not physically moved into Taurus yet. And we saw a square to Jupiter. And so for me, it materialized as this whole, look at how amazing and big these changes could be in this next year. And it could be so big that it's just life-changing. And then it's almost like Saturn has now come in and be like, well, this is what your dream was. So, you can fantasize about something or, preach or pray or ask for something. But then when it shows up, what do you do with it? And are you really ready to commit to this? And do you really believe in what it is that you're doing? So unlike the eclipses that we had in November of 2021, which were, big, right? At least the one that was happening on the 19th of November, This one's a little different. Back then we had Jupiter that was in a square. Now we have Saturn. So the mid-November period is kind of suggesting kind of like this between a rock and a hard place, right? Energy. And usually when we see eclipses, doors open, doors close. We see definitive things come into our lives and definitive things end. We meet people, we get married, we have children, people transition. I mean, I see more transition happening during eclipse periods than any other time, because it's like that portal in time where it's like, if you're going to get out, there's the door. It's time to go then. And without these eclipses, then we wouldn't really kind of shake things up, and we wouldn't really actually initiate change in our lives. My point is that this particular eclipse will square Saturn, and it is kind of saying that we are going to be between a rock and a hard place. We have to make a decision. Eclipses in Scorpio do have a tendency to have much more of like this, or when the planets are in Scorpio, crisis, right? And so, they come in pairs. So we're actually going to see that the first one's going to take place here around October 25th, 2022. So next month. And this will involve Venus, which is the ruler of the North Node, and it's also the dispositor of Uranus. So I think as we see like Venus, come into conjunction with the South Node, oppose Uranus, square Saturn, I mean, it's like when it comes to the markets, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to investments, savings, I think of like Venus in Scorpio is like the fear of opening up. Some pretty wild stuff's going to be kind of going down. And to me, it does seem like the period of the end of October through mid-November, it does feel crisis related with the conjunctions to the South Node and also the squares to Saturn. So we don't want to wait until crisis hits. We want to take a look at this storyline that's been going on really since, like I said, February of 2021, and ask ourselves, where have I been feeling held back? Where have I committed to the plan? Where have I been willing to upend anything in regards to fear of not having physical security or not having enough? And also, what does it mean to be wealthy? I think that's something I keep asking myself. Like, I think in the future with, Jupiter and Uranus, coming into its conjunction, which won't be fully until 2024, what does it mean to be wealthy? We're totally transforming what it means to be wealthy. Being wealthy means that you're going to have land, or that you're going to have food, or that you're going to have support, or that you're going to have a connection with the earth. For some of us, it might mean that wealth is knowledge, and knowledge is power, especially as we start seeing these two planets coming into the conjunction in 2024. And they're going to miss, unfortunately, a trine to Pluto, but they are still going to be sextiling Saturn. So if you guys think you've seen some wild stuff, I would say, we haven't seen anything yet. I would encourage everybody to be really thinking and meditating on where we can be making changes and how we perceive security, wealth, worthiness, talent. I mean, North Node and Taurus is like, we need to make art. We need more people who specialize in ceramics and oil painting and dance and design and really be trying to figure out how we can create a life of comfort and connecting to simpler ways, learning how to develop talents and things that we can do with our hands, getting back to a sense of craftsmanship, even if that means we don't have immediate gratification, even if that means we don't immediately get a paycheck, right? And in a lot of ways, it's about putting the glory plan or putting our goals before immediate gratification, and we're actually learning to undo these patterns of just being able to suddenly have something and being fulfilled, and learning to work towards goals, even if that means it's going to take a little bit more time. And what many people don't realize is that if you've been doing this in 2021 and 2022, that you begin to see the fruits of your labor when Jupiter goes into Taurus next summer. Now, fully, I think it's going to be when, Jupiter hits around 18 and it's conjunct Uranus, and that's going to be like the spring of 2024. I speculate maybe that is people who invested in crypto. Maybe that is people who bought land. Maybe this is people who decided to leave their job and learn how to go bake bread or make clothing, or, become a person who works with wood or builds furniture, or maybe you decided you want to learn how to garden. these are going to be the things that are really going to pay off, believe it or not. So if you're looking to have more pleasure, leisure type projects, things where you can build things, grow things, develop things on your own, don't fear the setbacks right now, and know that some of this stuff is really going to start to play out within about a year to 2 years time. You really want to take a look at where Saturn is in your chart. You want to take a look at where Uranus is in your chart. I have done tons of videos on this through the signs. I also taught a webinar that was on the North Node Uranus conjunction. I still have that for sale on my website for those of you guys who want to watch it. You guys may not realize, but that's going to unfold over time. We're going to see that unfold over several years. And I talk about how it's going to affect us and like where, so you can go and see a little bit more about that. In terms of who it's going to affect the most, you know, everybody feels it. When we have Saturn and Uranus in a square, everybody's like, what is that pressure? Especially because it's in the third decan, so it is going to be kind of taking place in our day-to-day lives. We do see this happening. But it really is hitting the 17 to 20 degrees of the fixed signs the most. So if you are a Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, Sun, Moon, or Rising, or if you have any planets between 17 and 20 degrees, just know that, you know, the pressure is going to build. I was just texting one of my favorite astrology mentors, and he's a Leo with a Scorpio sun, Scorpio rising. He's a Leo rising, Scorpio sun, excuse me. And I texted him and I was like, you're gonna need to tell like the cosmic jam band up there to like turn down the volume, because I was like having Saturn square my sun again, and Uranus in opposition to my sun and Mercury. Yeah, it's been a lot, but it's made me slow down. I think it's made me focus on quality. I think it's made me consistent with my goals, even if it means I have to cut back in other areas of my life. I think it's been worth some of the sacrifices. It's really, really single-handedly been the reason why I got back on YouTube. You know, that it was for that very reason, and realizing that I really do love to teach and educate, and that is my way of being able to be creative. You know, I come from a whole family of creatives. My whole father's side, they're all fine artists and painters, and you know, my siblings are very talented. My sister writes. My brother can pick up any instrument and play. My father writes, and also he's a professional artist and a photographer. So for me, being somebody who's like tone deaf, and also, you know, dabbled in playing instruments, nothing that really kind of stuck with me. I can draw a very, very nice stick figure. This is definitely my creative forte of being able to translate, you know, what's going on in the skies, and being able to relate this information to people, because I'm so passionate about it, and it's been a really like life-changing 2-year process for me, and I'm really thankful. And I know that yet still the eclipses are coming, so I'm not going to count any of my chickens before they hatch. Before I wrap, I would like to, now that I've been kind of going on and on about this, read you guys just as a reminder. I would like to read you the Sabian symbols for each of these 2 degrees. So I will be reading the Sabian symbol for both 19 degrees, because we round up, of Aquarius, and also 19 degrees of Taurus. So let me remind you of these degrees. As always, my handy dandy book, the Sabian symbol. Okay, so I've read this, I know, 2 or 3 times. So some of you guys are like, yes, I get it, but not everybody watches all the videos. Okay. So 19 degrees of Taurus, a newly formed continent. The keyword is originality. The theme is a fresh opportunity. The symbol speaks to the fact that the experience ultimately conforms to desire and expectation. The image of a newly formed continent was described by Mark Jones as symbolizing the raw substance of existence. He emphasized the fact that reality is constantly being reworked through course of successive overall cycles. The implication here is that experience expands awareness, and with each realization of or understanding of reality in any given situation, man is called upon to make adjustments and reestablish himself, to look for new opportunities. Positive at its highest, the symbol represents creative, sweeping vision and potential to transform the world. The accent is on evolution and changes in the environment. You may suddenly notice some new situation that has been quietly developing for some time. Your greatest advantage lies in changing circumstances. Identify the potential in your new place of things. Start planning now. Okay? I resonate with that. I think with Uranus being at that degree, it's just, you can't, I mean, it's like, it's been one plot twist after another since 2019 going into 2020. I mean, literally, it's like, you can't make this stuff up. I keep joking saying I need a bingo card because I think the last thing that we're waiting for is for like the aliens to show up and maybe they will save us. I don't know. All right, so let's now read 19 degrees of Aquarius. A forest fire quenched. The keyword is concern. The theme is rising to the occasion. The symbol speaks to the successful resolution of an emergency or crisis, to satisfaction in a job well done. The image of a forest fire quenched symbolizes the suppression or quelling of a dangerous and destructive force. The emphasis is on this degree, is on the opportunity in every group experience for discovering personal skills and abilities previously unrecognized and turning every ordeal into a productive adventure in a social responsibility. On a practical level, the symbol alludes to diffusing explosive situations, calming tempers, and bringing potentially volatile or dangerous situations under control. At its highest, it represents the ability to function efficiently and under pressure. The accent is on getting things under control. An emergency situation could be resolved, much to everyone's relief. Your greatest advantage lies in recognizing skills and abilities that crisis reveals and making an effort to refine them. This is all happening technically, okay, we round up because of the Sabian symbols, but this is all happening at 18 degrees, right? So, health workers, hospitals, the service industry, health in general, nurses, doctors, practitioners, healers, right? Pets, animals. These are the themes that may come up. I'm wondering, is there going to be some grand finale? Essentially you've got Biden coming on the news. He has said this in so many ways. He has said this in interviews recently. The pandemic is over. We're still dealing with numbers, but the pandemic is over. Okay. So we've got schools that are understaffed. We've got hospitals that are understaffed. And likely there are teachers unions, right? There are teachers unions. We see this. Where's my screen brush? There we go. Teachers unions. I could see that as Saturn and Aquarius, groups. Also nursing unions, all of this stuff. And whether or not there is going to be somebody who has some kind of answer or something to say for the people in uniform, the teachers, the healthcare workers, everybody who lost their job as a result of feeling like they needed to make decisions for their health, and where their rights were taken away, their resources were taken away, their livelihood was in jeopardy as a result of people in power telling them what they could or they could not do. I'm not here to talk about whether or not the jabs worked or didn't work, or if they're real or they're not real, or if COVID was real or not real. I know it was. I got COVID. I got sick. It happened. Nobody knew. I didn't talk about it because I didn't feel the need to, do a video and cry about it. But I had COVID and I was sick for a bit. And I feel like, personally, this is now going to be the reckoning for the truth that's now coming out in the middle of a Mercury retrograde in Virgo, where we're realizing the numbers and the facts, they're not lining up. We're about to hear some major, major worldly things that are going to start coming out when the Sun-Mercury cazimi is taking place in Libra. It's going to be on a world axis point. Mercury's still going to go back and forth in opposition to Jupiter. You're going to hear some wild stuff. We're probably going to realize that a lot of the inflation perhaps maybe isn't because of the war, in Ukraine. That it probably isn't because we're having shortages. It's because this has been created, right? There is something artificial with Uranus. Uranus is artificial. It's unusual. It's not normal. So we're seeing artificial weather patterns. We're seeing artificial things going on in the world. A whole string of earthquakes, shortages, crops that aren't panning out, things that aren't being, that just aren't normal. You can see it in the market, stuff that's being manipulated. And I'm wondering if this is going to be the reckoning where people start to realize as we come into these eclipses in the fall and then finally Pluto and Aquarius in the spring, that perhaps maybe the last 2 or 3 years, everything that's been going on, the shutdowns, the lockdowns, the limitations, the social limitations, has been in preparation for this new reality that's coming up. Perhaps. Like I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. One thing that I love about astrology is that you can look into the future and you can see more or less what's setting up. And also that there is a divine dance, there is a purpose for all of this. It's not all doom and gloom. Some of these things happen. I believe that ultimately some of these type of regimes collapse. They're not sustainable. It's just not. Some of the things that are being orchestrated and created right now, even though it may feel like the next couple of years is going to be a darkening or it's going to be a separation or a limitation, it's not. It's being set up this way because there is a huge shift in power, huge shift in energy, a huge shift in awareness that's going on. And I'm hoping that if you guys are conscious and aware, you can start to see where things are unraveling and where there is a need to kind of upend certain areas of your life so you can, really change and adapt. Got a couple books here really quick that I want to share with you. First of all, Planets and Aspect. This is another book that I like to read that I keep on my desk. Just to give you like a very specific definition of what the author has to say about Saturn square Uranus. The square between Saturn and Uranus refers to the difficulty you have in making decisions, especially when old attitudes must yield the process of change. It's the kind of apprehension you may have experienced when you learn to drive a car after going everywhere on a bicycle. You fear in unfamiliar situations is really the only deterrent you have in your progress. Perhaps you were so conditioned by a parental discipline that you still look for approval before asserting your creative potentials. It's probably more difficult for you to break with the past for most people, but it's imperative that you do. Your future depends on successfully breaking old ties, even if that means alienating others. You may be reminded that you can't do this or that because you're not old enough or you lack the experience, but you must persist. Once you overcome the fear of the untried, you can climb to any level that you choose. You are especially suited to work in large organizations where the sky is the limit for your potentials. You have sufficient self-regard to know your limitations, and once you recognize your own self-worth, success will be yours. You respect the lessons in the past, and they should serve you well in the pursuit of your goals. Politics, industry, science, research, even the occult fields will benefit from your contribution. You must be prepared for the occasional setback and reverse, but it will only make your credentials more secure and establish your worth in the eyes of those who need your talents. Success sometimes is made more precious by failures encountered along the way. In your personal relationships, this dynamic of planetary combination suggests that you will seek out people who will give you approval. Don't underestimate your virtues, which include a sense of responsibility and the ability to give form to your ideas. Stop looking for approval. Be different. Challenge the status quo. Be free thinking, right? Do things differently. One more, and then I'll let you go. Another book that has been really helpful, I think I've talked about it on the channel before, The Gods of Change, okay? Pain Crisis and the Transits of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I've been reading this. I got this in preparation over a year ago because I was like, I need to start reading this. Just knowing that I was going to have like Uranus oppose my Pluto and Saturn square my Pluto, and I was like, we'll see how this goes. I wanted to see what he had to say briefly because there's actually a lot here. Okay, Uranus and Saturn in a square. When transiting Uranus aspects Saturn, the new and the old meet. And the nature of the aspect suggests how friendly or fraught this meeting will be. Transit Uranus that's in a trine or a sextile indicates we're ready and prepared to integrate new things. Transiting Uranus conjunct square or oppose Saturn suggests a time where the new meets the old, but in a way that usually proves more problematic and disruptive, probably even explosive. In many cases, we will feel so restless and fed up with certain spheres of our life that we have little choice to make drastic changes in these areas. If we stayed in a relationship or a if we stayed in a relationship or a job for Saturnian reasons, That is for the sake of security, loyalty, or sense of duty, or need for status. We will be swayed or pushed by the force of Uranus to alter these circumstances. Even if the old structures in our life have not been that wonderful or satisfying, some of us may still find it difficult under the Uranus-Saturn square to let go of what's familiar and established. We cling to the known existing, even though another part of us wants to break loose. In the end, however, transiting Uranus in hard angle to Saturn won't let us get away with keeping everything the same. We can only try to avert total disruption by maintaining the best of the old while making space for the new. Or we can try to salvage what has been spoiled and improve unsatisfactory situations. But should we fail these attempts to make better, we may have no choice but to clear what is old and stifling in order to create room for all kinds of changes Uranus wants us to bring. Yeah. That's it in a nutshell. I think that the challenges of upending things, how that can physically affect us, financially affect us, right? But also the pain of staying the same and feeling strict, and limited, or that there is some sense of depression, that's kind of hanging around, that's not really allowing us. I think my takeaway from all of this is that, in my opinion, this is just me, and I'm somebody who obviously is very alternative, okay? Like, super alternative. I mean, hello, look at how I look. Look what I do for a living. What if the most rebellious thing that I could do would be to conform and to be more traditional? And I don't mean in a sense of my religious views or my political views. I'm not really so much talking about that. But, what if like the most punk rock thing you could do is have a garden or learn how to knit? Maybe keep a chicken coop. Maybe deciding to get committed and get serious and like regularly teach and like work with groups of individuals, have a family, get married. A lot of the things that I have done over the last 2 years are very much against the grain for me. I am somebody who doesn't quite like being pinned down. Once something is expected of me, I have a tendency to go the opposite direction. Was never really a fan of doing videos for YouTube, primarily because it was like, well, it becomes expected and people want it to be there at a certain time and it's not giving me the freedom or the this or the that to do it. And so for me, it's been like this reprogramming of, no, it is different, do it different. It doesn't have to be the same thing. You can do however you want to do it. It can be creative. And it is possible to allow there to be more structure in my life and see that it is a little punk rock to have a little bit more stability and to settle down a little bit. So for those of you guys who are also feeling that you're being bound by the resistance of staying the same or breaking free, I hope you find your answer. I hope you find that middle ground. Know that with what's coming in the weeks and months ahead, likely we're going to see, especially in the months of October and November, this totally unfold. I'm going to be teaching an eclipse webinar that's going to be taking place on October 9th. And I'm going to be having this webinar at 10 a.m. Pacific time. It's going to be all about the solar and lunar eclipses that are taking place this fall, the ones that I talked about in this video. These eclipses are going to have a real strong emphasis on me talking about Venus and Uranus and Mars, because we're having eclipses that are associated with the signs of Taurus and Scorpio, but there is going to be a lot of Uranian energy with a conjunction to one of the eclipses, and also just a return of this Saturn Uranus square. So keep in mind that this eclipse is still going to be very active for the better part of like the next year. So just because we have a lot of things that suddenly shift taking place for us in the fall this year, it will take time to unfold into spring and even the tail end of 2023. And if you look hard enough at the timeline that I've presented you since the beginning of 2021, where we had the first Saturn-Uranus square, likely you know what's getting ready to shift in your life. So take a look at, like I said, where Taurus is in your chart and where Saturn is in your chart. Take a look at that tug of war. Watch the other videos that I have done in the past about this. You can find it on my channel. I've done several of them and I take you guys through the signs. And if you want to know more about how this is going to affect you during the eclipse cycle, take a look at my links below. You can join my webinar. try to make them affordable for everybody who can kind of participate. I'm trying to get more into the habit of teaching more. So if you guys like what I'm doing, you like this content, leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. A lot of time and energy and love goes into this because I want to be able to put this information out for people who are wondering what the heck is going on, and also want to understand how they can better work with these energies in these changing and challenging times. If you want to book a reading with me, check out my links below. You can find me at beyondtheveiltarot.com. I've got a few spaces open in November and December for one-on-one clients. You can also join me live on Saturday nights. I do live readings at 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Otherwise, you guys take care. I'll see you all very soon. Enjoy the rest of your week.